Elaine Gunn speaking. Today's date is March 24th, 1998, and I'm at the home of Mr. James Williamson in Pittsfield. Mr. Williamson has kindly consented to be part of our oral history project for the invisible community. Thank you, Mr. Williamson, for allowing me to interview you.
Certainly welcome.
I have a number of questions, and we seem to understand the kinds of questions that I will be asking you today. And we'll start with your family background, if that's all right. And I'll ask you just to talk a bit about your parents, who they were, where they were born, if they weren't born in Massachusetts, why they came to Massachusetts, and when they came, if you remember, or if they told you at any point. And perhaps a bit about your grandparents, as much about them as you can remember. And I'll stop there, and then we'll continue on. If you want to just talk a bit about your parents and your grandparents, please.
Okay, some of this may be a little bit scratchy because my memory is not as good as it used to be, and those things when I was younger, when I was told those things, of course, they weren't really that important to me, and I don't have a record here before me. My mom, however, was, I believe, born in Pennsylvania. At least I know that she and her family came from Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania area. And she came to Pittsfield I would guess, when she was a little girl. And again, I don't know the year. My dad, I believe, was born in Danville, Virginia. And then he moved as a young man to Reidsville, North Carolina. And then he came to Pittsfield from Reidsville. Now, I would guess that he came to Pittsfield somewhere in the 30s. I'm sorry, the 20s. Somewhere in the 20s. I recall my grandmother on my dad's side, whose name was Viola McCain. She came and lived with us. I remember her living with us as a very young child. I don't know where she was from, and I'm not too familiar with any facts concerning my dad's dad, my grandfather. On my mom's side, my grandmother's name was Mary Moore, and she had a sister that was living in Pittsfield as well. I'm trying to think of her name. She would be my great aunt, and her name was Jasper, Mrs. Jasper. I'm not sure of her first name at this point. And she had two children, Calvin. I'm sorry, I only know that she had one child, Calvin. And Calvin had two children, which was Betty, was his daughter, and he had a son, and I believe his name was Calvin as well. Let's see, did I cover that? That's.
Do you know why your parents came to Pittsfield?
I don't know why my mom's side, but I do know the paternal part. My dad came to Pittsfield to seek work, and at that time he and quite a few of his peers came to Pittsfield. In fact, in those days, a good deal of the men, the black men who came to Pittsfield, came from the same town, Reidsville, North Carolina. It was interesting.
In the 20s, you're talking about the 20s.
In the 20s, and it was interesting that so many of them came from the same small town, Reidsville, North Carolina. And I think what happened is they came to find work, and they found work, a great deal of them, at the Wendell Hotel. That was the most popular and the largest hotel in the area at that time. I remember my dad telling me about he and his friends. One came up and found work and liked the area, and then of course got in touch with his friends, and then they came up. And so ultimately there was quite a few young black men who came up at that time. And So that's why, what I remember is my dad coming. And I also remember that my dad ruined, what happened in those days is these young black men who came out generally stayed in the homes of black people who were already here. And I think that's how my mom and dad got together. My grandmother, Mary Moore, sort of liked my father very much, thought he was a great guy. And I think that was the impetus that got my mom and dad together.
Were you born here in Pittsfield?
Yes, I was. My entire family, myself and my brothers and sisters, were all born here in Pittsfield. I was born July 12, 1995, on East Street.
Wait a minute.
19, yeah, 95.
Not 95.
Certainly. 1935. Which is when 1935, July 12, 1935, in St. Luke's Hospital, which was on East Street at the time.
So you've lived here all of your life?
All of my life.
Except for the time that you were in the service, which we'll get to in a
Yes,
minute.
I've done some traveling. There was a brief period that I did some traveling, but essentially I've been here all of my life.
And you mentioned siblings.
Yes. My oldest sister, and oldest in the family, child in the family, is Rosemary Viola. And the next oldest is another sister, which is Lillian Marita. And then the next sibling would be Charles Edward. And then I was the fourth in age category. Then after me came my brother Robert Allen, and then my brother Clifford. And I believe Clifford is Clifford Allen, and my brother Robert, I'm not sure of his middle name. And then my sister, Elizabeth Sharon.
So you have a rather large family.
Yes, two of which were deceased at a very, very young age. And three are now deceased. Three at a young age. Robert died when he was 15, I believe. He had a problem with epilepsy, and he was not able to attend schools, and ultimately he had to be sent to Palmer State Hospital, and he died there. I recall going to his funeral in the Palmer area. My brother next to me, the one that my older brother, he died when he was 6. He drowned behind our home in the Housatonic River. We lived on Deering Street, and the Housatonic River was right in our backyard, behind our backyard. And he died, and I remember it was 3 days before they finally had to lower the water and dredge the river, and they found him 3 days later. And he was 6 years old, and I remember that very well. I was 4 years old. I remember that so well because the day he was missing, sometime in the evening, I would guess it was getting dusk. It was a little dark, and the police came to the house, and he and I were dressed exactly alike. I had a baseball cap on, and we just had some new clothes that we were sporting around, and Mom dressed us both alike. So the police came in and they looked at me, and I remember them shining a flashlight on me so they could get a description of my brother. Of course, at that time they didn't know that he was in the river, and so I remember that quite well. And it's, again, 3 days later.
So then you do have, now the rest of your siblings, are they living here in Pittsfield, or have they left the area?
Presently, we have 4 remaining. I have 4 remaining. There are four of us remaining, and 2 of us are living here. My brother Clifford Allen and myself are living permanently in Pittsfield. My sister Lillian Marita is living in California, in and also my sister Rosemary is living in California.
May I ask this question? Was the man Williamson related to you at all?
No, he wasn't. It was interesting because there were 3 James Williamsons. We were all about the same age. In fact, I think we were the same age. It was probably a year either way between all of us. And all of our families came from North Carolina. 2 of us had the same mother's name, Catherine. And it was quite a thing. And at one time, man Williamson, which he was James Irving. Was he James Irving? Yes, James Irving. He and his father and his grandfather lived on Circular Avenue. And the other fellow, James Leroy, lived on Circular Avenue. And I lived on Circular Avenue. So we had 5 James Williamsons living on Circular Avenue.
Isn't that
And
funny?
we were from 3 different clans.
Because there's another family I want to mention, Waddell.
And of course,
He's not related to
he
you
wasn't
either.
related to
Okay.
me either. And what has happened here in Pittsfield is that there's a real problem with the Williamson name. From that perspective, my sister married Charles Williamson, so that created a problem. And then I married Lois Fry, and then Charlie's brother, Peter Williamson, married Lois Fry's sister. So it just got to be a mess.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
fact,
Right there.
I'm always asked, are you related to this group of
Mhm.
Williamsons, or are you related? And rather than to try to explain all of this, we just simply say yes.
A lot easier, isn't it?
It's a lot easier to let go. But yes, there's 3, actually 3 different families. But that, in a small town, in the black community, there were so few of us that you either married one of the few of us here, or you didn't get married. You had to leave or stay single. I mean, there were not much choices.
Remember that. There was another, I thought she was Williamson, but I don't know. A young lady who married the Sullivan, Dr. Sullivan, who was,
She was a Williamson, and she was James Leroy's sister.
okay,
That was either Joan or Yvonne Joan or...
I can't remember. I should be able to remember her because she's
Yeah,
close to my
she
age.
married
but I
Dr.
can't
Sullivan, who
yes,
was
who
in
became
the Carter
administration. Yes, yes.
And her mother's name was Catherine Williamson, and then later she married Patrick and became Catherine Patrick.
Okay, yes.
So the Williamsons
Yeah.
and the Patricks are half brother and sisters.
Okay.
But that's not
That
my
can be,
name.
that can be very
It's
confusing.
another, exactly.
Yeah, it's very confusing. Right. Was there anybody else living with you when you were growing up besides your family? Sometimes I know in black families, there were an extended family member often lived with.
Yeah, that was the case, and when I was a young man, that's how it generally worked. When the parents would live with one member or another of the family, grandma was always around. In my family, yes, my dad's mom came from North Carolina or wherever, I would suspect North Carolina, and she lived with us for probably about, well, I was very young, so memories then are not what they are today, but I would guess 3 or 4 years. And she died, and in fact, I remember when she died, because in those days, when you were sick, the doctor came to your home, and she was very, very sick. And then I remember that they took her out in the ambulance, but usually when they took you out in the ambulance, you were pretty far along the way, and she died sometime shortly after that. But that was, and I also remember her because she was such a great friend to all the kids. And that's one of the things that we had as children that most people, the kids today, don't have that advantage. And it is an advantage because Mom was the enforcer and Grandma was, she smoothed it over and she made the hurt go away. And I'll never forget it. And one of the things that I'll never forget Grandma for because, and I don't know that she was right or wrong, I think she was right. And I think I would maybe do the same thing. In those days, you had to go in the basement to get people through the coal and the wood in their basement. Through one of the windows, they would shoot the coal in, and GE would bring and give people the chips of wood from their scrap. And the basements were dark, they were dirt floored, and very often, if they had a light in them, the lights, you didn't have any bulbs. And I would have to go down in the basement, in that dark basement. Well, in those days, there was always this talk about the boogeyman. And we were always being taught about, if you don't behave, you're gonna get the boogeyman, and the darkness. And somebody somewhere told me about the boogeyman downstairs. And so now I had to go, my mom would make me go down and get coal, and I was absolutely petrified. I mean, I wasn't putting on, it wasn't that I didn't want to go downstairs, I had to do the work, I had no problem with that. I really had a problem with going downstairs. I was petrified. My grandmother, realizing that, would sneak out the front door, go around the back door in the hallway, because you had to leave the back door, and then go out in the hall and then downstairs. She would leave out the front, sneak around the back, and hide in the entranceway to the cellar. When I came out to go down to the cellar, she'd take my hand and bring me down and stay with me until I got the coal, and then she would send me in the kitchen. She'd go around the front, come in the front door, not to create a problem with my mom. So that was just so wonderful to me. So she understood, and I'm sure if my mom knew that I was really, really afraid and was not just trying to get out of the task, she would have not insisted that I go downstairs. But when the parents spoke in those days, whatever it was, we just did it. There was no question, yes, no. It was just simply, which in some cases was always the best. And that was a great thing where grandparents, they were there, and they sort of monitored the parents and helped the parents raise the kids, which was something we could use today.
Oh, absolutely, I agree, absolutely. We do miss that today. Yes. Are you or were you married?
I have been married, yes, I was married. I married Lois Fry, and we were married for probably about 23 years, and we simply, it didn't work. And we didn't have any, we had an amicable, if you can. And ours was special. We did have an amicable divorce, and it was a no-fault divorce, and we agreed that the children were more important than anything that we had at interest at the time. So we made sure that and we're still friends now.
Is that Jimmy's sister? Or?
No, that would be Louis Fry's and Catherine Fry's daughter, and Jenny's sister is another generation, an older generation. That would be Jenny's aunt or niece.
Niece, okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And children, you mentioned children.
Yes, I have Lois and I had three children. James, our oldest, and he's followed 3 years later by Jamie, or Jane, and then she is followed 8 years later by Catherine Elizabeth, named after my mom, and also my wife's mom, because they both have the first name. So it worked out very well.
I should say.
So I told my daughter that she was named after my mom, and Lois told her she was named after her mom, so it worked out very well. We're all happy about that.
So that you are divorced at this point?
Yes.
And your children live in the area, or do they?
James lives here presently. He had left and he came back. And my daughter Jamie, who is the city councilor here in Pittsfield, the first black female city councilor and the first black councilor at large, she lives here in Pittsfield, and she is in business, and she runs and owns Jamie's Appliance World. She went to California.
You talk about Jamie's Appliance World?
Yeah, she went to California, and I was, which we were talking about at a later day, I had a business called Appliance World. I simply was not going to continue. It had just grown too much of a hassle for me. I was having some difficulties, and her mother called her and told her, and Jamie wanted to be sure that the family tradition continued, so she decided to come back home, help me with the business, with the idea of continuing the business, which ultimately happened.
So she was living in California just decide after she
Yes.
finished school? Did she go to school in
Yes, she went to school, and she went to school in Hanover, New Hampshire, on, I think it's, what is it, Yale, or what college is there?
Dartmouth.
Dartmouth. She went on that's the school that's on the Dartmouth campus, or near the Dartmouth campus. And, what happened is she had some very good friends here in Pittsfield in her senior year, her junior year. And they were such tight buddies, and they moved away. They were called the Stimsons, and they moved away, and he got a job on the campus, you say it was Harvard?
Dartmouth.
Dartmouth campus. And they visited each other, and when Jamie and this friend of hers, Jamie came home and asked if she could go and stay there and do her senior year there. Well, I kind of didn't like that idea too much. But Lois and I talked about it, and we thought that this might be good for her because Pittsfield, they were so limited, especially for black females. We thought that the experience would be good and healthy for her. So we went and checked them out, and they were very nice people. They were a white family, of course, and we decided yes, and we thought the scholastic environment was perfect for her. And so we agreed, and she went to her senior year at Hanover High School, and she graduated from Hanover High. And then she went on to Mount Vernon. It's a private college for girls. And after the Mount Vernon College, she went to California with family, with her mom's, some of her mom's family, brothers, sisters, or whatever. And she stayed there, and she got involved in the banking institution, and she was doing very, very well in the bank. And then but she decided that she wanted to be home with her dad, to help her dad. She was always with Dad. She was my first girl, and I had a special relationship with all my children. But Jamie and I were so much alike that it was just
Same mannerisms.
yeah. So she came back, and now she runs and owns with her own money. I should say. I mean, most people think that I set her up and gave her everything. That is not the case. She used her own money. She did it all by herself. I certainly helped her wherever I could, but not in a financial way. But she took the bull by the horn, and she created her own.
You must be very proud of her.
Very much. She's everything I ever wanted to be, and then some.
Yes, wonderful.
Yes.
And the fact that she's able to win elections, first
Twice.
female in Pittsfield, Massachusetts.
And interestingly enough, she won it the first time out. And usually that doesn't happen. Usually, especially for at-large, ward councilors or something somewhat different. But the at-large council, of course, represents the whole city. Now, that was quite an achievement for her during these times.
I would think so. Now, you said you have another daughter, or a younger
Now I have another daughter, Kathy, who was, what college did she attend? She attended the Black College in Washington, which would be Howard. Kathy did very, very well. She looked into colleges when she was here in Pittsfield. She graduated from Pittsfield High School, and she went all over the country with, there was this group called Upward Bound, and she got involved in that program.
Very well.
And she got involved with a bunch of, there was a group here who, they formed a group, and they went out looking at black colleges, and she looked all over the country, and she wanted to go to a black college. And she decided, she had other options, but she decided on Howard. And she went to Howard, and when she finished there, she liked the area, and she stayed in Washington. I went up and visited.
She still lives in Washington?
She's in Washington. No, when she's living probably right at this moment in Maryland, I believe, Maryland or Virginia.
Oh,
they're right next to each other, because when I visited her, I was in all three of them, and I
sure
thought,
you
I
were.
didn't know that I had left
Yeah.
any city. But, so she's at the, I believe it's, her home address is in Maryland. Yes. And she's doing very, very well. She's managing a new and very, very upscale it is, spa. So she's doing very well.
And your son lives in Pittsfield, you say?
Son lives in Pittsfield, and he decided to come back. He was not here. He lived somewhere in the south, I believe, Georgia. And he came back to his sister's sister, so he is now working with his sister at Jamie's Appliance World.
Oh, good.
So it's a
Good.
family again.
Absolutely. So do you have grandchildren?
Not a one.
Not one yet. Well,
Not yet.
there's time. So you and your wife then met here in Pittsfield, right? Because this was your home and her
Yes.
home. Okay, and that often
Yes.
happens.
I met her when I came back from the service. I didn't know her before I left, and I didn't know her as a youngster growing up.
Are you let's say religious person, or spiritual? Do you belong to a church, or you have any church affiliations or any religious affiliations at all?
I would say I'm religious, probably very religious. I'm not a fanatic. There, by nature, I would say, of the situation that I'm in here in Pittsfield, I do not regularly attend church. As a matter of fact, I go to two churches when I do go. I am probably still a member of both. St. Stephen's, because my wife's family went to St. Stephen's, and she brought my children there, which usually happens. I go when the mom goes. And then when I was coming up, I went to Second Congregational Church, which is considered a black church, if you will. And so I go to either, but those are the two churches that I've attended here in Pittsfield.
But you must have some memories of growing up in the first one church and the other.
Well,
Picnics or outings or things that they used to have.
all of my memories in church would be from Second Congregational, because I went there as a child, and I do have some very fond memories. Of course, I recall Easter the most, because that was a special day for black families. I remember that, and I never understood it. We call it the Easter Parade, and everybody it was seen would buy new duds for Easter. And all of the children would have brand new clothes, and the parents would have brand new clothes, and all the girls had bonnets, and everybody was waiting to see what everyone else looked like. And they would go to church to show off their wares, and the church was full. I'm not sure there was one soul that, especially the children, that didn't go to church. And on Easter Sunday, that was really that was an occasion.
Especially, it might have been perhaps one of the few times during the year that black families bought clothes for their children, especially those who
Given the circumstances of the day, and
yes,
and the economics, black folks in this area certainly had very difficult time getting and keeping a job, and especially a decent job. Most of the jobs that the blacks were able to get, those blacks that came up with my dad, were menial jobs, were the porters and the janitors and the elevator operators and the shoe shine boys, although they were men. Those were those kinds of jobs. And they really didn't have the money, so it made sense that Easter was one of those times you would buy clothes, and because it worked in, and Christmas was another time then people would try to save their money and buy clothes during the Christmas season. I mean, and that just made sense because they weren't able to buy clothes as needed. So that just seemed to work. There were lots of things that happened, I think, that we did based on the economy, or our economy, not the greater economy, but the economy of the blacks.
At this point, are you considered to be retired, except that you do go into?
Well, what happened is I retired from Appliance World, but I really didn't retire. But that's when Eagle wrote it up. Retired. People have the idea that I retired from life, but not too young to retire at this point. So when Jamie took over and created her own thing, then I moved on to the west side, which is the black community. Well, it's one of the black communities, or the oldest black community, if you will, in Pittsfield, the west side. And I went there under a grant that came out of the Rodney King situation. And my task was to train with the experience and the background I had being in business some 30 years. Young folks in need, not especially young, but people on the west side,
Where most
primarily
blacks live.
both blacks or lower,
Yes.
disadvantaged people live. And the job was to help them, to empower them through business. So we were to teach them how to do a business plan and actually how to eventually get into business.
Has that been successful?
Well,
Because if you have one person who
What-
went through it and
I think it
did
was
a good job.
I think it was very successful, but I have to say, as most programs go that the federal government devises, they will take you to from point A to point C or D or F, and then it's over. And what really happens is that there is so much more that you need to know and so much further you have to go to make the initial program make some sense and be successful in that sense. But yes, if we took them from point A to point C, and that was our charge, we did that and we did it very well. And so from that perspective, it was very successful. We had the highest success rate that anyone in this area, or probably in most areas, have reached. We went further than what the grant called for. The grant called for us to do the outreach, get the participants in the program, give them a 12-week course, and to start. There was some follow-up, but that was it. There was no means to help them get into the business, to support them further on with once the business started, or that kind of thing. But we were successful in not only getting them through the course and having them learn how to write a business plan, we were successful in helping them right through the financing stage, right into business. So we had, I believe, somewhere near 12 people who actually went into business. I know that at least 9 of those people were minorities. And that was, I mean, there hasn't been 9 people in business in Berkshire County up to that point in its entire history.
No, not 9 minorities.
Or that's Pittsfield in its entire history.
Or in Berkshire County.
Probably Berkshire County.
Yeah.
And we put 9 people in right away. Unfortunately, the program didn't carry on, or we were not able to stay with them, and that was a necessary thing to help them through the first 5 years in business are the most crucial. And we actually, I think it was a shame that we got them that far and there was no more support. Because I think in retrospect, we hurt them. I don't think that I would ever do that again unless I could carry it through its reasonable conclusion.
And follow them.
And follow through, because they were just set out there. They
Just a little more safe.
yeah, and that was just too. They didn't know how to purchase. They didn't understand so many things. Not because they were, not bright. It was because we didn't have the time to teach them. They didn't have the experience. So that was not a good program. One thing I think that happens, it did show a lot of people, including those people who did go in and ultimately had to close shop, that they could do this, that it could be done. And it showed the younger people that it gave them some hope that, yes, black people can be business people. Yes, black people have the skills, can obtain the skills, and can do the job. So from that perspective, it was very good. And some of those people who unfortunately didn't have the wherewithal to make it, to keep it working, may someday down the road, I'm sure many of them will, do it again when they find themselves in a better circumstance.
But they could then look at you and see you were an example of what a successful business person is, does, and has been able to do in the city of Pittsfield.
I had special parents.
And that
I had special
What a key,
parents,
isn't it?
and that was the key to my success.
Yeah.
Because whenever I didn't know what to do, I would just refer to what Daddy told me,
Mhm.
and it always worked.
Mhm.
You know, I loved my dad. I respect him, and my dad and my mom both. They gave me a really good outlook on life, and it was just made common sense. And I like people, and so
And your dad said worked at the Wendell Hotel?
my dad worked at the Wendell Hotel, and he worked at the
Years?
for many years as a bellhop, I guess they were called. Then he worked at the Greyhound Bus Station as a porter, and then he worked at England Brothers. I remember he worked at England Brothers as an elevator operator, and I remember he telling me that he made $16 a week, which was like
Yeah. Hmm.
outrageous. But that, you know, for those
For those times.
it was okay.
Yes.
And from his background, it was okay. But yeah, it was one of those. That I always had a problem with those kinds of jobs, and I asked
And
my
you
dad.
did.
I asked my dad, why do you let these people? And referring to when he was shining shoes or whatever, taking bags, and make you look like you're not important, you're a nobody, and you're a jerk. And my dad told me that what those people feel or think really isn't the important thing to him. That he always does the best job that he can do, and that when his day is over, he takes his money and what he's earned and goes to his house, and those people don't exist anymore. And so,
I suppose they had to have that attitude, otherwise how would they make
how could they handle it?
Handle it, yeah.
'Cause I certainly couldn't handle it.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
hurt and ashamed and embarrassed that my
Mhm.
dad was doing those kinds of jobs, and as any child would be who grew up in my circumstance.
But he had to earn a living for his
He
family.
had to learn whatever. Yeah. But a young 10-year-old child doesn't relate to that. He
No.
doesn't realize what. But my dad gave me a good outlet, look on how to deal with people and what the value, work ethic, and there's just what you have to do.
And now, he lived long enough to see you and with your success.
One of the things I'm so very happy about, that he lived long enough to see me have a appliance store on the main street in Pittsfield, not a small little shop somewhere in the corner, but I was in the mainstream. He saw that I was equivalent to or superior. My business was more successful than some of the people who had been in business for 40, 50 years. He saw that I was a smashing success in terms of where we came from. And that he was so proud, and I was so proud of him. He was so proud of me, and it was just, that's the one thing I'm so grateful for. That means more than anything in the world. My dad and my mom,
I think so.
they both saw their son. And incidentally, my parents, and I certainly understand this, they never dreamed. Their dreams for me was, I remember my mom said that if I worked hard enough, maybe I could be a carpenter. And my dad said that I could probably have a 3 or 4 fleet of shoe shine businesses, and that was reasonable. But my mom, thank God, she said to me always, she always preached to me, if you have to think big. Think big, think big. She said, if you want to reach the moon, shoot for the stars. Because if you come short of wherever you're trying to go, if you come short of reaching the stars, then you'll probably be on the moon, and then some. So she always told me to think big, think beyond what I think I can do. Go, just think big. And for me to go on North Street and have that business at that time was a big thing.
It was big, yes.
That was
big thinking,
way,
yeah.
that was way out of what's expected from a black person at that time in Pittsfield.
Now, when did you open your business on?
I went into the appliance business in 1967. And that is for myself. I went into the appliance business in 1960 for Harder Electric, and 7 years later I opened up my own store. And I opened it up on Linden Street then, which was off the North Street beat by about 3 blocks. It was really in the residential area, but on a well-traveled street. And then I did so well that within 6 months, I was doing well enough to go on to the main drag, and I opened up a place on North Street 1967, 68. But it was 6 months after I got into business. I had intended to go into business simply to become a technician, which I was for Harder Electric, and do the repairing, but I had worked myself into having the kind of reputation that people wanted me to fix, to buy. They wanted to buy from me. So I had a good following.
Clientele.
And I had the clientele there, so it just simply made sense. So I decided to give it a try, and it just went so well, and it kept going up. We finally, that was in 1967. In 1981, we were doing in excess of $2 million. About 1984, we were doing just hundreds of dollars, less than $3 million gross sales. So we were much, much larger than even the people who we were dealing with. And I don't think most people realize how well we were doing. We were the biggest appliance dealer in Berkshire County, bar none. We were bigger than that, and we had some mighty tough competition. We had days where we did, I think one of our record Saturdays was 67 pieces. That's phenomenal to sell 67 major appliances in one day. That's just, we had 2 and 3 delivery crews. We did a good job. I don't know that anybody could do that volume again here in this area. But we did more than the other dealers and any other dealer in the area.
Did you have difficulty with financing your business initially when you
So bad.
wanted to go into?
It was terrible. What happened is I had a good personal credit. I had good personal credit because I was taught to pay my bills.
Key. Yeah.
So that got me
Parents.
that's exactly right. That came from my parents. That got me the minimal, because remember, I was just going to fix appliances, so I wasn't thinking in terms of any large money. So what I did, what I kept finding out as I entered in business, and actually I have to call a spade, there was a lot of things I didn't know. I had no idea what a financial statement was. I didn't know what a balance sheet was. There was lots of things that I didn't know. I knew how to sell something, put the money in the cash register, not spend it, pay my bills with it, pay for the product, and then still hang on to it as long as I could. And so I was very frugal. I was very well organized that way, but I didn't, although my method was correct, it wasn't professional, and I didn't know what I was doing, even though I was doing the right thing by luck. So I had a lot to learn. But after I did learn these things, I had a very, very hard time with the bank. And what ultimately happened is that whenever I went to the bank and asked them for a loan, if I asked them for, I began to realize that if I asked them for $1,000, they would let me have $800. If I asked them for $3,000, they would let me have $2. It seemed that whatever I asked them for, they would not give me what I needed, but they would give me enough to get me in trouble, but never what I needed. And so it was interesting how I finally overcame this. What I did was I decided that I was going to take on a very important franchise, and I went to the bank and I told them that I was going to get the Maytag franchise, which is really a valuable franchise, and that so it's pretty secure. And I was told that, well, I'm sure they didn't believe I could get it at that time. I wasn't sure that I could either, but I was told that if I got the franchise that they would finance that product for me. Well, they had already given, I had probably about $5,000 from them at that point in time. So I'd be looking for another 5. So when I finally did get the franchise, I went to the bank and told them that I had the franchise. They acted as though they didn't. Which of course I know what to do now, but I just simply took the agents or the representatives' word. So when I came back to him, he acted like he didn't know what I was talking about. So anyhow, I refreshed his memory, and then I started complaining and told him that, you know, everything I asked for, you never seem to give me, and you made a commitment to me, and now you're backing out. And so I sort of forced him, if you will, to go along and give me the line of credit for the Maytag. So that got me up to $11,000 I owed the bank at that point in time. And I kept having difficulty. So what I did was I walked to the bank and I said, hey, every time I come here and ask for some help, you give me something shy of what I asked for. And I began to realize it doesn't make any difference how much or how little I asked. Of course, I'm sure I couldn't get more than 5 at one time. I should ask for more, but that's not the way I do business. So I said, I've decided that you don't want to work with me, I can't move forward, so here are the keys. And I told them, I owe you $11,000 now. I know very well that you can give me a decent-sized loan. I know also that I can get a loan, that you can give me a loan under your SBA program, and you'd be guaranteed 90%. And at 90, I'm looking for $50,000 now. I said 90% of $50,000 is $5,000, which is what you can lose. The way it is today, you're going to lose $11,000 because I'm through. So you have a choice. Either give me a $50,000 guaranteed loan from the SBA, or you can have these keys. And furthermore, I'm not sure that I had a problem with the person I was dealing with. And then they immediately brought me to another loan officer, senior loan officer, who walked me around the bank, they listened. But my perspective is they only listen when they recognize the sense I made. You're going to lose $11,000 today, and that's the end of that. Or maybe we'll get $50,000 and you might be successful, and we'll lose nothing, or we'll lose $5,000. So I just put them in a situation where it just behooved them.
Makes sense.
I had a loan in 2 weeks. I had the money in 2 weeks. That does not happen. And I didn't know how to write a financial statement, and I got the money. But they knew that I had the ability, and I just needed it. And they did work with me. That gentleman, that new loan officer, Stan Riva, worked very, very close with me, and he helped me. He did a lot for me, and I really appreciate it. And I always paid him back. And they never, ever, ever had a loan with me that I didn't pay back prior to the due date. And so it was a good relationship, a good deal for them, and obviously a good deal for me.
Oh, quite the mark of a businessman.
Well, luck.
Yes.
Listen to Daddy again.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me about your school experiences growing up in Pittsfield, where you went to school, and
From
memories.
From the beginning, or from?
Well, what you, some of your, the good and the bad, I suppose, and whatever.
Well, my earliest recollection of school is when I went the first day of school, first grade. And I remember my mom took me in, and it was exciting. All of us little guys were coming in, and gals. And I just couldn't imagine why these kids were crying and kicking and screaming because the mothers were leaving. I was glad to get out and have some fun. And they would just, I couldn't imagine what is wrong with these guys. That was the first thought.
Where was it? Which
I went to Briggs School, which is on West Street now. It's now apartment homes, houses. But it was from what they call K1, I think, today. It was from first grade to 4th grade.
Now, where did you live at this time?
I lived right across from Briggs.
Oh, awesome.
It was Deering Street.
Okay.
Deering Street faced Briggs School, so I just had to walk down my street and across the walk, and there it was. So we lived just up the street from the school. And I guess the second thing that I remember very well, of course, I remember the little squares and the ABCs and the little numbers, and which got me off to reading. And then the second thing that struck me was Little Black Sambo. I will never, ever, ever forget that horrible, horrible story that they taught us as little children. I was in that class, and there were probably about 3 black children in there. I was one of them. James Leroy Williamson, we spoke of in the past, was one of them. And I'm not sure if I remember, Herbie Evans was the 3rd black.
Tommy's brother.
Tommy, yes, the young Herbie. So we were the 3. I don't recall any other black children in that, but there's 3 of us of the whole class. And so we're reading this story of Little Black Sambo. And this dude has got multicolored clothes on. He had on yellow and red and purple and orange. And he's got multicolored hats and multicolored. He looked so absolutely ridiculous. And then the lions start chasing him around. Tiger, yes. And the tiger start chasing around the tree until the tiger just got, so somehow the tiger turned the butter. Somehow this tiger turned the butter. And then Little Black Sambo's mother and father, who looked as ridiculous as he did, or worse, started taking this butter and making some pancakes out of this tiger. And they were eating something like 167, or I'm not sure the numbers, but they were just an outrageous amount of pancakes. These 3 ridiculous black people were eating after the lion chased them around and scared them to death. It was a horrible story. It made me feel, and what it was doing, it was identifying with me, and it was saying to me that this is my heritage. This is where I come from. This is who I am. This is my culture. Oh, I felt it. I knew it. I mean, it was. There was no way that you wouldn't know that. The teacher, I don't want to say the teacher, but I'm sure it was from the teacher. She was telling the story. She was teaching the class. I'm not saying that it was. I don't know who is the culprit, if there is a culprit, but that was the most demeaning thing to a human being that anybody could do at that early age. That's what stuck into my mind. That's what's horrible. And it was terrible. So meaning. And that's the first time that I ever became ashamed of being black. That they were teaching me to be ashamed. They were teaching. It was awful. Little Black Sambo.
Now, you went to Briggs School, and you had, were these experiences, this kind of experience, was it ongoing throughout the school, or was it throughout your years? Or?
I would say that it was ongoing. Different kinds of things happened, but they happened, and it was horrendous. The next major thing that I recall, and at that time, I sort of thought that it was the most wonderful thing that was happening. My 4th grade teacher, and I was a little hellraiser. I mean, there's no question. A lot of us were. My 4th grade teacher told me that if I would be good and just not give her any trouble, I could do anything I wanted to. I didn't have to do any work. I didn't have to do any papers. I didn't have to do anything, as long as I would behave. I took that deal. That was a good deal.
It sounded good.
That was an excellent deal.
Yeah.
I could go out and flap the erasers when I wanted to. I could sit up, in those years, there was a teacher's desk and another long table aside of her. I could sit up there in the front if I wanted to. I could do whatever I wanted to, and I did. I bought into that, and I remember I used to write plays, and I used to do stuff with my sports, make basketball plays, because I liked basketball, and I also made theater plays, and I did whatever I wanted to. Did the erasers when I felt like it. And
at what point did you realize that she was really a disservice?
Down the road, because what she did was she took my foundation of education away from me, and she moved me on to the next grade. And doing that, I mean, it was bad enough because people in those days, especially poor people, who generally fits into the black people, had severe problems keeping their kids in school every day. Sometimes we could not go to school, not because we were sick, but our parents didn't have the money to clothe us, to have us, give us clean clothes, all kinds of things, coming from money problems, and other problems as well, but in any case. So when I moved on to the next grade, I was lost because I didn't have that fourth grade background. I did some things on my own. I mean, I didn't sit there every single solitary day and do nothing. But I was allowed, I didn't have to be accountable in any manner.
Did
So-
the teachers continue to have low expectations, you suppose, for just
Well,
blacks in
well,
general?
you said it. It took me a little time to understand it, but as I thought about this over the years, I think I feel I like the teacher, and it's hard not to like her, although I know she did me a disservice. But I look at it from this perspective. Her idea was, well, he's not going anywhere because, anyway, if he's the smartest kid in this class, if I spend that kind of time on him, where's he going to go? With his father and shine shoes and be a bellhop. I mean, that was the name of the game. And so it's trying to be as kind as I can to this teacher, who I did like very much. I'm trying to rationalize that that's where she was coming from. But it was sad. I now think that she had, I can't excuse her anymore, or the system. It's horrendous.
You think that it was a system, not necessarily this teacher, but the system itself?
I think the system.
The system.
The system. I think that's what
Treated,
Little Black said, but I don't
yes.
think that every single first grade teacher had those kinds of feelings or meant that they knew it was happening. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had a job to do, and I think the system wasn't a book that the teacher brought in. And it's worse when the system puts this on a group of people. And there's no way that anybody can tell me that they weren't aware that a 6-year-old child, how much damage they were doing. Well, it reminds me of that the Woods that they tried to break him. What was his name? Kudapente. And they wanted him to be somebody else. And he said, no. Well, that's what they were doing to us. They were breaking us right down. Get us early, break us early. And they did. They broke your heart and some people's spirits. They didn't break mine, no. But they broke the spirits. I mean, imagine that. Imagine what the rest of the population, how they would feel if that same thing was done to theirs.
Oh, yes.
I should have
In revolution.
That would be outrageous, but people don't realize. And those kinds of things are so hurtful that a young man, I'm 64 now, 63 I think, I'm 60, how old am I? I'm 63. Now, I can tell you that I would not have repeated that story, not on tape, not anywhere, when I was 23.
Yes.
I wouldn't have done it when I was 33. So those kinds of hurts are so personal, so devastating.
And long lasting.
And they're long lasting that you will never tell anyone. So you get this terrible treatment and you shelter the people who are giving it to you because it's just so outrageous. Young people are taught to be brave and to take it. That's what we were taught in those days. You have to be brave and you have to take a little beating because that's the way life is. And so you tend to take that. It's written in the book. It's written by adults. It's written by the system. You're 6 years old. It's in the book. Got to be true. And it's sad. It's sad.
Now, people your age, when you were going to school, did most of the blacks who were in your class and along with you, did they graduate from high school or anything?
No, because that's another situation. Well, I didn't graduate. And given the kinds of things that went on through our school years, it was pretty likely that you weren't going to graduate. And when what they did with the girls, most of the black girls, they didn't go to college prep courses. They went to home economics, they were called in those days, because that's what they felt was their destiny. They just stay home, and that was against people of low economic base, the females. It was a thing, I think, that was not in the best interest of females because most females weren't working on them, and especially black females. They were doing domestic work. That was the kind of work that they normally got if they were able to get any job. But it was still the same. It was still the same kind of thing. In order to, very few people, I got off the point, but very few people, black people, graduated. It wasn't as important 60 years ago, or 40 years, or 50 years ago, 55 years ago than it is today. And if you might, like my dad and mom, one went to the sixth, I've forgotten which, I think my father went to the 6th grade, if he went that far. And, my mom probably went, I don't know, 10th, I don't know how far she went. But they didn't graduate because they were needed at home, they had to work, they had to help the family, and that kind of thing. And so education, because it was not as important to them, they wanted us to learn how to read and write, think and think. But in terms of getting a diploma, it was more important. And then certainly you can understand that in that day and age that you get a job. If you had a job running, I know some of my friends got a job running an elevator. Billy Jones, I'll never forget that, he got a job running an elevator. So that was more important than going to school. He was making real money. He wasn't going to get any more than that anyway from where we were coming from.
Diploma.
Right, even if he got the high school diploma, in those days he was still going to just run an elevator. So there was no hope, no expectations, and I think the system was designed. I didn't understand then. I certainly understand now. The system was designed to discourage black people, minorities, disadvantaged people from being educated, because that's how you keep people down. Keep them uneducated. I mean, that's if you do any. That goes back through history. That's how you keep people under your control, is by not giving them educated. And there was a law that blacks couldn't learn to read or write, so that was for that reason. But anyhow, back to the point is, no, I didn't graduate, and not very many of the black kids that came up, that grew up with me, graduated. A lot of them did, and Pampton, it depended on so many things. Some of the parents, I mean, even in the black culture and in neighborhoods, there were some of the blacks that were better off than others. And it seems to me, as I look back, those black families who were better off, that the parents had more, their kids seemed to graduate, especially where the mother and father were both there. So another thing that we suffered is, my dad, I don't remember when he left home. I think I was probably, I don't know, I was young. And so when you're living under those circumstances, then without both parents, you're in
pretty tough.
You're in trouble.
Yeah, it was tough. Yeah, I know.
So no, I didn't graduate, and I don't know that anybody in my family graduated, but
your siblings.
my brothers and sisters,
Yeah.
all my kids went to college, because of, there was a new day.
Yes.
But no, I don't think anyone in my family graduated from high school. But maybe wrong. My brother may have. In fact, I'm pretty sure they did. We went on later, all of us, and we certainly all of my brothers and all my siblings, certainly, although they may not have the certificate, have educated themselves. I've self-educated myself. I didn't get it in school. I did it through reading and taking correspondence courses and that kind of stuff, and reading the newspapers and whatever method I could find to educate myself. But
Well, you're an example, or a role model, because what you've been able to accomplish in your lifetime, living here in Pittsfield under such adverse circumstances and conditions.
That's true, but the unfortunate thing is that people don't know the story. They assume that I came from a certain kind of a background, and they have no idea that I didn't graduate from high school. They thought, that most people think I went to college and graduated from college. But I think that it would be more dramatic and more of a role model if people knew my background, my circumstance, the truth, which, I wasn't about to tell anybody.
Yeah.
And that's the sad thing about it, where I feel it's a story that should be told now.
Oh, I think so.
As a younger man, and while I was going through those moves, it was a story to hide. I would never.
Well, all of us have that. We all have the skeletons in our closets. Those of us who are,
Well, you want to be.
You're poor.
Yeah. I never believe we were poor. I didn't realize we were poor. I was having a hell of a good time when I was a very young
Sure.
person. And I never realized that we were poor, not less. And actually, we were the poor of the poor. And I just,
I know that.
it never,
Feeling.
ever occurred to me that I was poor. Like, no way, not us. You know, I mean,
Well, I
it
used
was,
to say that everybody around us, we're in the same boat as I was in, so.
it was normal.
It was
Yeah,
normal.
it was normal.
Did you have to, as a teenager, did you, sometimes children when they were growing up in families, and just to help with family expenses, get little jobs? Did you ever have to do that kind of thing? You know, that
Well,
was-
from the earliest time that I can remember, when we worked as soon as we could. I remember working probably on Scase's farm. There was a farm in Pittsfield, off West Coast County Streetway, west side of Pittsfield, when I was 12 or younger. And I remember younger than that. In fact, when I first started working, we'd make a shoe box and go up on North Street and shine shoes. And we would make, everybody had the shoe shine in those days, so you make some good money. And for a child, I think we got a quarter a shine. That was pretty good. Maybe it wasn't that much because we made some. If you made $5, you had some serious dollars. I think, you know, you forget, but I think we made, well, like 10, 15, I mean, we made some real good money. But we'd be out there from as soon as you can get up on North Street and traffic started until it was dark. I mean, we were loving that. And all of that money went to Mom. And all of that money went to Mom. And then I had a paper route. I remember I used to get about $3.75 a week for that, I think. So I was really young there. All that went to Mom. I remember my mom bought me a football, you know, after I worked for 100 years. And it was just a little teeny one. I want a real thing, you know.
That was one of the games you liked to play?
Yes, football, any sports.
Any
Football,
sport.
baseball, basketball, anything. Give me
So you played in all the sports in
Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes, yeah. I love that. So, yes, I worked at Newberry's, sweeping the floors as a porter. So, yes, the money always went home until I got to be older. And then, of course, I had a share of it then. But my mom always, I mean, she was fair, as fair could be, but I wanted to give her the money.
Yes, most children.
But we didn't get much, we didn't keep much. But that was the same with any of us who worked in those days. And I think that's probably all the poor people. I know Tubby Santoro, he worked and he was proud because he was making money to give to his parents. And that's what we did. That's what everybody did. You couldn't work. You had to pay an allowance. I mean, you had to pay, it wasn't called an allowance. It was, but if you worked, you had to pay so much for your room and board because you had a job. It didn't make any difference how old you were. If you were making money, you had to pay. And no one ever had a problem with it. We expected that. So, we contributed. Everybody did that. We weren't anything special.
Did you have chores to do at home while you were growing up?
That's your life. Oh, yeah. Remember the coal story?
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember that.
We didn't have to do any lawns because no one had a lawn.
Yeah,
where
right.
we lived. So we didn't have to do any lawns. But not only did we have chores, I did the dishes, and I mopped the floor and scrubbed. We didn't mop floors, and you scrubbed them on your hands and knees. There was no such thing as mopping the floor like I see happening today, but you had to get on your hands and knees and scrub the floor. Oh, my sister we all worked. I mean, the house, we all did the work. My mom, not only did we work, my mom taught me how to iron, sew, and I'm talking as I was a young lad. Iron, sew, cook, clean, everything. She taught me I could run a household when I was 12, and I actually could physically cook food. And I'm so thankful for that today because I'm needing those skills right now. And I have to recall, I mean, I haven't done that kind of stuff in so long, but thank God for Mom because all I need is a refresher course. And I'm now able to, I'm a bachelor now, so I'm now able to, I'm learning how to clean the house again and sew on buttons. And I'm surprised. I was cooking here the other day, and one of the young men, when son's young friend asked me what I was doing, and I was telling him making mashed potatoes, and he told me he never had mashed potatoes from scratch. He says, what are mashed potatoes from scratch? He said he never had them. So what people do today is, I guess, everything comes out of the box.
Yes, instant.
But I said, what do you mean mashed potatoes from scratch? Doesn't everybody do
No,
this?
they don't, no.
So, well, I do, and it's great fun, and I'm just sorry that I didn't do it when I was younger.
But we all are, but we don't,
Sure.
but you've taken some of those values that your parents had taught you. You've named one. Were there others, other kinds of things that you learned from that you remember, that you come into play now, they're important, that you have been able to pass on to your own children?
Right. Well, I guess we make choices. I think I had to make the choice to go out and run the business and develop a business, and all my efforts had to be put there because I worked 2 jobs. I didn't just go in business. I had to work at the hospital. I worked at the hospital at night, and then in the morning, I started doing my business. I worked almost around the clock, so I want to give myself a break. I really didn't have the time to help my wife at home with the kids, my kids, our kids. But that's the greatest loss.
But the work ethic you certainly obviously
Worked
passed
all
on
the
to
time.
you, passed on to your children.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And common sense to be kind, and be fair, and be honest. If you're honest, and you're kind, and you're fair, that's it. I mean, everything else is going to fall in line. You can't be a jerk, but my kids, they have a sense of fairness, a sense of honesty, and I think that'll go. And
Did you discipline them at all?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't have to. I verbally disciplined them from time to time, but if I said thus was thus, that's the way it was. I'll never forget Jamie, my councilwoman at large. I guess she was probably 8. I really don't know, but she was very young, and she took a single-edged razor and cut the couch. And Lois came to me and said, "Did you see what Jamie did?" And I went to Jamie, and she was arrogant about it. So I never have ever touched my kid. So we went upstairs in the bedroom up there, and I gave her her first spanking, her only spanking, and she was breathing like she was going to die. And I was spanking her, and I was crying. So I'm crying, she's screaming. I had to come downstairs, and Lois had to give me a shot of rum. It wasn't worth it. It killed me. But I never had it. My kids always responded. Thank God I didn't have to. You know?
Were you disciplined?
Oh, yes.
And,
Oh, yeah. Everybody was. And you got to remember, too, my mom was a single, what do we call it? A single parent. A single parent. And she had 6 of us most of the time. And we raised Cain and Abel, I guess we used to call them those days. And we had to stand in line and we were in line, and when we got our weapons, everybody, that was the way it was done in those days. The children, there was no abuse. We all expected it, we all got it. And if we raised hell at school, we didn't come home and tell our parents. We got punished in school, that was it, we didn't tell. Because we told our parents, we got punished again by our parents, so no. It was a different day.
That was our generation.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you were making some mashed potatoes one day. Is that one of your favorite kinds of foods to make, or do you have any favorite recipes or anything like that?
Well, I don't know that, my background is such that we basic foods, it's what we normally have. And I didn't, although I knew how to do all of the cooking, I didn't. But, my grandmother, turkey is because of the festivity of the holidays, is something that I love to have. And in terms of, some southern foods, my family didn't really do a lot of southern foods, but I love fried chicken, southern fried chicken. Never Lois, just, I don't know, her parents weren't from the South, I don't think. But I finally learned how to do it, and there is a knack. And I learned how to do southern fried and French fried potatoes. Now, that's the worst thing in the world for me, but I love it. I used to what is it, rice and chicken and collard greens. Look out, you know,
Good.
that is really good. So, yeah, that kind of stuff. And I, when I was overseas, I went to England, and I was in England for about 3 years, and I took a liking to rice and curry. And I thought it was beef, but it was lamb. And because London is a pretty international city, and so we got a taste of lots of things, and I love that.
So when were you in the, so were you in around the Korean War?
I was before the Vietnam War and after the Korean War. I actually came in, when I went in, the Korean War was still on, but it was over, but it was officially still on. So there was no war during the entire time I was there.
Okay.
So I didn't have that. And I went to the Air Force, so I never saw any action. I was in a peacetime war.
Good.
So I was fortunate in that sense.
Do you have any hobbies at all? You spent a lot of time working.
Well, I haven't had much time for hobbies. When I was younger, I loved basketball. I just ate, slept, drank basketball. So all kinds of sports, except outside winter sports, because I was a little thin. I couldn't handle the cold. So I'm not too fond of outside sports, winter sports, but any other.
Born and raised here.
I'm not fond of it. I was inside playing basketball when it was cold. But I was on the swim team, the basketball team, football team, baseball team, all the sports. I love those. Carms, all of the things at the Boys Club. The Boys Club, thank God, they saved me. That was a great organization. I spent most of my time there as a very young person.
Yeah, I want to ask you, talk about that a little bit more, memories you have of, Berkshire County, or the city, what the city did for you or didn't do, or...
I want to tell you still, now that you mentioned that, we must have been about 12, 13 maybe, and I formed a group. I was a captain, and I formed it actually, a group called the Wrens basketball team. And I formed after the Renaissance, if you remember the Renaissance, was pretty popular. They came because we used to, in Pittsfield, years ago, everybody used to go to Boys Club to see these professional people. The Renaissance were just like the Globetrotters, probably stepped down. So we formed a group, and we call ourselves the Renaissance. And I was in the junior corps, so I had to be about 12, 13. And we didn't have any equipment. So I went up to England Brothers. I went up on the 3rd floor, I think, where they had the sports equipment. I went to, and I shopped for the uniforms and asked the lady how much they were. So then I asked if I could speak to the owner. So she took me in this place, and I saw all these offices with glass doors, and a row of offices. There was an office on that floor, whatever floor it was. I think it was the 6th, I don't know what floor it was, but it was where the sports things were. And she asked me before, and I said, well, I want to talk to them about purchasing these. I didn't say purchase at that time, but getting these uniforms. She smiled, and she brought me in. And I just went in this big office and saw this man there, and he introduced himself as Mr. England. And then I told him that, he asked me my name, and I told him my name was Junie Williamson, which I was called at that time. And I told him my dad had worked there as a bellhop, or elevator operator for some years, and he told me, oh yeah, I remember your dad. He told me he remembered my father. And he asked me what I could do, and I said, well, we have a team, and we don't have any uniforms, and I'm wondering if we could get them on credit, and then I will come up and pay you as much as I can when I get it. So we can work jobs, small jobs of, I do pay, we collected papers and bottles and did all kinds of things. I said, when we get enough money, we can keep paying you, I'll keep paying you. I'll keep paying you until paid off. Well, I didn't really know what I was talking about. But he said, okay. He said, I'll tell you what. He called the girl back, and he said, listen, I want you to go out. How many do you want? I told him, well, he gave me 6 or 7. And he told the girl, he said, and also, what's the name of your team? And I told him it was a Renaissance, and he asked me how I spelled it, and I explained what it was and why it was. And he said to the girl, also make sure they're numbered on the back, and you have the put wrens on them like they want. So, and he said to me, and don't you worry about it. So I came out of there, and that at 12 years old,
Wow.
with 7 uniforms for free.
So
I
that
just-
says something about your business acumen.
It says something about, I told him
Or
the
nerve.
truth, and I wasn't afraid. And I mean, I was gonna pay for them. At least I thought, I could have never paid for them. But my mother said, shoot for the stars, remember?
Yes.
So I wasn't,
yes.
I was going for the stars. I was up on the 6th floor, you know.
Well, you were on your way.
You know, so, and that's what you do.
Yeah.
I mean, rather than sit back and say, oh, we could never have them, I never go for it. But the other part of that is Mr. England, what a wonderful thing, there are some nice people
There are
out
some
there.
nice people out there, yes. Yeah.
And that had to cost him some money.
Oh, yes.
To, you can afford it, well afford it, but you don't just
You don't just hand out.
and then have them, all the stuff sewn on.
For you.
That was pretty good.
Pretty spectacular at that time.
So we
Yeah. It's
So
wonderful,
there are
what a
some-
wonderful story.
as I knock the people about the low-back symbol and the other stuff, there are these people who make up the difference, although the hurt is there. I mean, it's too bad that there shouldn't be any difference to make up, but nevertheless, for every 1,000 nasty, harmful people, I run into one good person makes up the difference.
Yes.
Yeah, it makes up the difference. You feel all better. It's always been that way in my life. I've always found that there's always somebody that's decent, because of whatever's happening, somebody somewhere, and it keeps you going.
Mhm. Obviously it does, yes. But, well, wow, what an interesting life you led in Pittsfield, and stories are wonderful.
Pittsfield's
Can't thank you.
Well, it's my town. I love it. I'm glad that Pittsfield. I mean, I love this town. I was born here. I know this. I know the cracks in the street. It's my home. I've been all over. I've been all over the world. I've been everywhere. And when I say that, I'm not exaggerating, because with the success of the Appliance World, we went everywhere. We went everywhere. To Paris, I've been to France, Germany, Rio de Janeiro. I mean, it goes on and on. If you knew the places I've been, Budapest, Vienna, all of them. But Pittsfield, it's always
home.
It's home.
Yeah.
It's the home of homes, and it's the greatest place in the world to me.
Now, when did your parents die?
My mom died in about 1985. My dad died about, I'm going to guess, probably about 1980 or something. I blocked that out. My father, I just couldn't accept his death, and somehow I've been able to block it out. I can't remember when he died. I can't remember. I don't want to remember. And you see, when my dad died, I wanted to tell him how grateful I was for what he did for me and how he raised me. And I had a lot of things to say to him, I never did, and I couldn't handle it. And after that happened, before my mom died, I went and I told her how much I loved her, how grateful I was for her teaching me all the things that she's teaching me, and I let her know that she was responsible for my success. And I said all the things that I needed to say. So when she died, it was okay. When my father died, it was not okay. Because I wanted to say so much more. I wanted to say something to him. And I wouldn't respond when they told me he was dying, because I couldn't accept it. I wouldn't believe it. So, but I'm getting older now. I know my father, he knew anything I said to him, he already knew anyhow.
But he had experienced your success.
Yes, he was.
And that was,
He knew.
but we forget, we don't say things to our parents that in those days, you didn't grow up saying those things.
Exactly. And that's what's good about the new world.
Yes, absolutely.
Children can now speak.
Yes.
They should speak.
Wonderful.
But I say that to all. I don't have a problem, because I know all my children love me. And if I die without them having a chance to talk to me, I know they love me. And so that's cool. That's good. But I recommend that everybody talk to their parents.
Well, I think
For the
so.
person who's living.
Who's living.
This is benefits the person who's living, not the person who dies.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
boy, if you
I
know,
agree.
I've seen people die, and I say, oh, I wish I had told them this, or wish I had told them that. And I do, I go out and tell people.
If you are there, give me a call at the door, will you?
Cool? Yeah, I'm here.
Well, this has been a great interview, Mr. Williamson. And on behalf of the Invisible Community Project, I'd like to thank you for allowing me this opportunity.